My dear friends, how are you? Welcome back to Raya's studio. I am Raya. I'm sure you've all heard of Britain's shortest-lived female prime minister, who was only in office for 45 days. So, what exactly did she do that caused her to step down in just 45 days? Today, I will be elaborating more on this topic. Mary Elizabeth Liz Truss, also known as Liz Truss. She was born in Oxford, England, on July 26, 1975, and grew up in a family that did not hide its left-wing leanings, with a mathematician father and a mother who was a teacher and a nurse. Truss High School was a public high school in Leeds, and after completing secondary school, she enrolled into Merton College at Oxford University. She also majored in philosophy, politics, and economics. Truss was already active in student politics during her time at Oxford, although she supported the Liberal Democrats at the time, before her switch to the Conservatives. Truss was drawn to politics early on, and became president of the Oxford University Liberal Democrats, where she also campaigned for the legalization of marijuana. However, shortly after graduating in 1996, she switched to the Conservative Party, which was at that time in a political desert. Truss was rumored to have played the role of Margaret Thatcher in a school play. And after that, she saw Thatcher as a role model, and used to pose for pictures on a tank like Thatcher did when she went to West Germany. She also loved wearing silk shirts with bows, which was a feature of Thatcher's dress code. After graduating from university and before she formally entered politics, Truss worked as an accountant for energy giant Shell and the Cable and Wireless. In 2000, she married fellow accountant Hugh O'Leary, and they have 2 daughters. Truss's first real foray into British politics would have been in 2001. In that year's general election, Truss stood as the unsuccessful Conservative candidate for West Yorkshire, and again in 2005, she was defeated. However, her political ambitions were undiminished. In 2006, she was elected as a city councillor for Greenwich in southeast London. In 2010, Truss was finally elected as the MP for South West Norfolk for the first time and entered the political field. David Cameron, then leader of the Conservative Party, also put Truss on his A list of preferred candidates for the British general election. It is worth mentioning that her private life threatened her political career in 2005, when she had an affair with married MP Mark Field, a political mentor assigned to her by the Conservative Party. Field's marriage later ended, and Truss, the scheming woman, told her husband that her lover was not so friendly anymore. Originally, O'Leary had separated from Truss, but the separation eventually ended, and the two of them are still married, even until now. It must be said that the British political world is full of scandals, much like the former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. He has so many illegitimate children that he probably can't even remember all their names. In the same year as the 2010 election, Truss co-authored a book, Britannia Unchained, with 4 other Conservative MPs running for election. The book's recommendations for removing state regulation to improve Britain's standing in the world made her a prominent advocate of free market policies among Conservative MPs. 2 years after becoming an MP, in 2012, Truss became the UK's Education Secretary. In 2014, she was promoted to Environment Secretary. And in 2021, Truss became the UK's second female Foreign Secretary. Often emulating Thatcher, Truss portrays herself as a staunch defender of Western democracy. She is even better than Johnson in her tough stance on Russia. This was demonstrated when she declared during her visit to Lithuania in March 2021 that Putin must fail in Ukraine. But her political philosophy is more like that of another big right-wing figure, Reagan of the United States. A strong call for lower taxes and smaller government. And she praises a post-Brexit Britain as an ideal country. With such a message, Truss attracted the support of some 160,000 Conservative Party members, most of whom were white and elderly. On September 6, Truss flew to Balmoral Castle to meet Queen Elizabeth II, leaving behind the last photograph in her lifetime. I have to say, even though Truss has had an almost smooth sailing career in politics, she is, from my personal point of view, an economic fool when it comes to the economy. Let's see what she has done since she came to power. Taking over the mess left by Boris Johnson, who stepped down due to his scandal, Truss faced a country mired in hyperinflation, energy crisis, and recession. At the time, UK inflation was already the highest among the G7 countries, having exceeded 10% in July. Not to mention, Citi expects it to rise to 18.6% in January 2023. British businesses and families are warning people of the fact that they will not survive the winter without government help, and that millions of people will have to choose between food and heat. On her first day in power, due to the calculations in market, Truss decided to cut taxes and increase loan charges. Within a few hours, the pound dropped to 1.1444 against the dollar. On September 8, the Truss government introduced its first major policy, an energy program on the order of £150 billion in size to limit soaring energy prices. The package will hold the average household gas and electricity bill to around £2,500 a year, £500 above the current cap but £1,000 below the limit, due to be implemented in October. And I wondered at that time, where is the money coming from? This plan would spell doom for investors in UK government bonds. A £150 billion bailout, twice the size of the £70 billion bailout announced during the new crown epidemic. This will lead to an increase of about £200 billion in the issuance of British government bonds this year and next year. In other words, the state borrowed £200 billion from the people and proceeded to subsidize the same people. Can you understand their actions? A large number of additional treasury bonds will only lead to the depreciation of the price of treasury bonds. And, according to my previous talk about the concept of interest rates and yields on treasury bonds, since the interest rate of the national debt is fixed, the devaluation of the national debt will raise the yield of the national debt in disguise, which also means that the country is carrying a heavier debt. On the same day, Elizabeth II passed. After 10 days of national mourning, she and the then Chancellor of the Exchequer, Kwasi Kwarteng, announced a series of unfunded tax cuts in a mini-budget that shocked global financial markets. Note that it is unfunded. On the same day, the Truss government announced a mini-budget that included the £16 billion annual increase in national insurance contributions, NI, being permanently scrapped. The previous government's plan to raise the corporation tax rate from 19% to 25% will also be scrapped. An annual reduction of £19 billion in UK Treasury revenues. A reduction in the top marginal income tax rate from 45% to 40%, permanently increasing the deficit by £2 billion. A reduction in stamp duty on house purchases, reducing UK government revenue by £1.4 billion a year. Employment salary rules will also be permanently changed. The scale of this tax cut exceeds the tax cuts introduced under Margaret Thatcher's administration in 1988, and is the largest in half a century. According to an analysis by the Institute for Fiscal Studies, IFS, a British think tank, the plan will cost £60 billion over the next 6 months, and will bring the expected deficit to £190 billion, an equivalent of 7.5% of national income, a huge deficit that will produce the third highest government debt in Britain since World War II. British think tank, Resolution Foundation, also warned that the cost of these provisions is endless, and could increase significantly if there are additional increases in gas prices. On that day, a triple kill happened to the British stock, bond, and currency. The pound fell through 1.10 against the dollar for the first time since 1985, and has since fallen to 1.09 and lower, down by more than 3% during the day, the largest decline in 2.5 years. 5-year British government bond yields rose close to 60 basis points, the largest rise in history. The benchmark 10-year British bond yields rose more than 30 basis points during the day, eventually hitting the largest single-day rise. The FTSE 100 index fell nearly 2%. I mentioned earlier that no financial support means that the government has no money and can only loan from its people, which will only exacerbate the national debt crisis and further expand to the stock and currency markets. In order to stabilize the market, on September 28, the Bank of England issued a statement saying that it would temporarily purchase long-term British government bonds on any scale necessary to restore order in the British bond market. The Bank of England's action will be fully guaranteed by the British Treasury. The Bank of England also said that the annual reduction of £80 billion of British Treasury bonds' quantitative austerity program remain unaffected and unchanged. Moreover, the sale of British government bonds scheduled to begin next week will be postponed until October 31st. After the news of the bond purchase, the price of British government bonds rose sharply. However, the pound rose slightly before resuming its decline again. Major analysts around the globe believe that the British government's bond-buying program is far from enough. The Bank of England must raise interest rates sharply to save the pound. And in the current round of global central bank rate hikes, some analysts even believe that the Bank of England should raise interest rates to 6%. For comparison, the US interest rate hike target this year is only about 4%. The good times didn't last long, because the next day, Truss said in a radio interview that lower taxes were vital to avoid a recession, and that she would not change the economic course. This directly brought down the market once again. UK Treasury bonds were sold off quickly, and UK pensions faced massive margin calls and were on the verge of collapse. According to a poll released by the market research firm YouGov on September 30th, 51% of the 5,000 Britons surveyed said that Truss, who has been in office for only 3 weeks, should resign, while only about a quarter of respondents said she should stay in office. On October 3rd, in response to the British government's abandonment of plans to abolish the top income tax rate, Prime Minister Truss said on social media, "We understand and have listened to public opinion." Earlier, UK Chancellor of the Exchequer, Cording, announced that he would not move forward with plans to abolish the 45% limit of income tax. This meant a major reversal in the policy stance of the Truss government, which has only been in power for about a month. Truss has compromised. On October 11th, a warning from Bank of England Governor Tony Blair spooked the market, warning that emergency bond purchases would be temporary and would not be extended, with only 3 days to prepare for the worst. After the news of extended bond purchases broke the previous afternoon, the Bank of England came out to dispel the rumor that the plan is still scheduled to end this October 14th. Indefinite emergency purchase of Treasury bonds is not possible. This is actually a warning to Truss. If the tax cut continues, then I don't care. Let the bond market collapse. On October 13th, under the pressure of the market, Truss considered a stunning 180-degree turn on next year's budget plan, abandoning her promise to scrap the corporate tax hike next year. On October 14th, under strong pressure from the Conservative Party and financial markets, Truss sacked Finance Minister Cording and appointed Hunt as the new Chancellor of the Exchequer to preserve her faltering prime ministership. Former British Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt will replace Cording as the new British Chancellor of the Exchequer. The UK government bonds skyrocketed upon this news. Truss admitted at a press conference on the same day that the tax cut plan announced on September 23, which triggered the financial market turmoil, were a little too aggressive, mentioning that they will take all necessary measures to reduce the medium-term debt, but insisted on wanting to achieve a low-tax British economy. In the previous radical tax cut plan, Truss cancelled the plan to raise corporate tax to 25%, maintaining it at 19%, which is expected to cost £18 billion, accounting for nearly 42% of its £43 billion worth of tax cuts. Thus far, the Truss tax cuts have pretty much formed a U-turn. However, as she refused to apologize for triggering the chaos in the market and the government's plummeting credibility. As soon as the press conference ended, British bond prices gave back their gains. This indicated that the market was not convinced by Truss's appeasement. After that, the new Chancellor of the Exchequer, Hunt, made it clear that he did not agree with the approach of Truss and courting, that borrowing money to cut taxes simply does not work, and that the plan to cancel the corporate tax hike would only reduce the burden for the rich. Honestly, even with an economy as strong as the United States, the bottom of the economy still lies on the back of low-income citizens. The Treasury and the central bank have since reformed a united front and gone back to the drawing board. On October 17, Hunt made a speech announcing that he would withdraw almost all the tax measures in the Truss tax cut plan. The details are as follows: maintaining the basic rate of income tax at 20% indefinitely, foreseen to save the government about £5 billion. Scrapping plans to cut dividend tax, with the potential to save about £1 billion. Scrapping plans to cut alcohol tax. Reinstating the rules on contract workers, foreseen to save about £2 billion. Scrapping the tax-free holiday shopping scheme, projected to save about £2 billion. At this point, Truss's ambitious tax cut plans have been almost completely reversed. On October 20th, Truss announced her resignation. In retrospect, she came to power only to push the UK's already deep-water hyperinflation to its death, and the difficulties facing the new Prime Minister when they come into power are going to be worse than when Truss came into power. I expect that this UK and global recession will last until at least the middle of next year, and until then, it's all going to be bare. Likewise with cryptocurrencies. Well, that's it for today. If you've learned something from my reports and would like more content like this, please remember to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching my show. Please be reminded that this show only represents personal opinions and does not constitute any investment advice. We will see you next time.